Okay. All right. Well, thanks everyone. My name is Rhett Harmon. I'm a service delivery manager here at Marshall, and I'll be providing the training. And this is meant to be an introductory training session. We will be able to do additional workshops. The idea here is to get you up to speed, at least to do some of the basics and start to play around with the system. And then what we can do is we can schedule another workshop and answer. Once you start to, the best way to learn sometimes is actually doing it. So getting in and then having a follow-up session, answer questions, and get in a little bit deeper into some specific topics like maybe geofencing or reporting or sending notifications, et.cetera. So this is meant to be more of a high level, and then, as I mentioned, we can get further into deeper into this. So I'm going to provide just a quick overview of what the LiGO interface and what the system does, and then we'll get down into working with the vehicles and vehicle tracks, working with the map and the map tools to do different things, and then some of the key things are your events, alarms, notifications, and then reports that are available. So everyone, let me correct one thing here I just noticed. So give me just a second. I noticed that this URL, I need to fix this URL. I'm going to fix that just so. Okay, go again. Okay, so. Oh, and I did that again. So share. Okay, so I just corrected the URL. So it's http://ligo.marshallgis.com. And everyone, Clay, you provided me a list of all the users, and they are set up with the first initial of their first name and then last name, a full last name. And then the password to log in is LiGO for you. And once you log into LiGO, there's a settings drop-down menu where you can change your password. So it gives you the ability to change your password once you log in. And I can show you where that is in a second here. And again, I'm going to also send you this PowerPoint presentation, so you'll have this as a reference as well. So after this training session, I'll send this to you, Clay, and you can distribute it to those to have this as well. So you should be able to use any sort of browser, Internet Explorer, Google Chrome, Firefox, etc., and just log in, as well as even your mobile phone. You can log in via a mobile phone as well. So just a little bit, when you first initially log into the application, you're going to see a screen that looks something like this, where you're going to see your vehicles in the vehicles window here. And you'll also see those vehicles on the map. So it's going to be centered on the vehicles wherever they're located and driving around. There's also there's a tracks tab and a tracks points tab. So this allows you to go back and look at historical tracks, the linear tracks, and the track points gives you the ability to look at the breadcrumbs. So each record down to the second level are in these tabs right here. In the top section, there's drop-down menus from reports to, as I mentioned, the settings. The settings is where you can change your password. There's a change password option. You can do other things such as save your workspace. So if you rearrange the interface the way you like it, you can then save your workspace. You can also when we start talking, one of the things we can do as a future training session is do an administrative training, and we can provide those with administrative capabilities to add users and those sort of things. But there's a lot of availability under this admin drop-down menu. And then you could maybe create workspaces for other groups or views for other groups as well, and be able to sort of group the vehicles by different things or based on roles that are in the system as well. So there's also a number of tools in the Windows drop-down which we'll cover, and then there's also maintenance. So you can, if you're on the fleet side, you can set up notifications for when vehicles need to come in and say get a 3,000 oil change or 5,000 mile oil change, or you know, based on engine hours or those sort of things, you can get notifications before they're due. Okay. The other thing is there's a toolbar to interact with the map, which I'll be covering in a lot more detail, but this is some different tools, zooming and so forth, which I'll be covering in more detail. Down in the lower left-hand corner, there's an events tab and a geofence tab. So this allows you to see your events that are occurring, and then also you can set up your geofences there for boundaries. Basically, geofences are areas where you want to be notified or capture time, and that could be either when vehicles go inside an area or when they leave an area. And again, we'll be covering that in a little bit more detail here. And then there's the concept of views. So right now, you just have a vehicles view, but down the road, if you're adding maybe different departments or different types of vehicles and you want to group those in views, you can set those up so that maybe all of your snow plows are in a snow plow view, and then you have street sweepers in a street sweeping view, and then maybe water utilities view or solid waste. And then, you know, from the fleet or maybe management wants to see all of them. So you can set those up based on permissions too, who sees what views and maybe what the default views are as well. So obviously the first thing that we want to get trained on is working with the vehicles themselves. So in your vehicles tab, you have your list of vehicles, and you have a name here. You can, when you click on the actual vehicle in the list, it'll center on the map where that vehicle is. So you click on it, and it goes to the map and shows that. There's some sort of default fields showing here. You can actually rearrange the fields just by dragging and dropping. You can also right-click and add additional columns here, or remove columns that are unimportant to you. So if, for example, driver name, you could take that off and add maybe speed or other variables that we're capturing. And again, you can save your workspace. So maybe one department, it might be idle time is important. Others might be speed or other, you know, other variables, or maybe the odometer value or other things that are important. And in this box right here, you can also search by any of your assets or your vehicles based on maybe the name, or you can put additional information on the vehicle, say maybe the make and model or equipment or maybe a group they're in, and you can, again, you can add those columns here, or you can search by those values, and it'll display those. There's this little arrow drop-down menu here as well. So you only have 3 vehicles right now, but, you know, again, if you had, say, 40 or 50, you could do other things, and I'll show you here in a minute what you can do, but you can filter based on those, and you can sort of create a temporary group. If you're sort of focused in on a few vehicles, you can group those, and then it'll just display those vehicles based on your filter that you have set up. There's also add new users. So this is how I added all the users at Lynchburg, is add this, and you can disable this for certain, again, based on your roles that you have. this button can go away and be available to those. And that's not only adding new users that log into the system, but also adding new, new vehicles and so forth. A quick way to view, your day's tracks is you can just right-click on a vehicle, and then there's this Draw Tracks option, and it'll draw the tracks where that vehicle drove. Just a quick way to do that. If you notice here, you might see circles. So you might see these circles, and these are stop times. So for example, 32 minutes here, 26 minutes here, an hour and 5 minutes here. So that gives you not only to the tracks, but it also gives you stop times as well. And as I mentioned, this little drop down here, you can create what are called buckets. So if you put, say, a few vehicles in a blue bucket, you can come up in this drop down and then just show those vehicles based on that. And that's sort of a temporary view versus maybe a permanent view that you're maybe just wanting to look at a few vehicles in your list. And then you can also, here's where you can edit users. So meaning you can, if you wanted to change the name of the vehicle or add additional values, that's how you would do that. You'd right-click on the vehicle and then edit that, and then you can either change the name or put additional values on the vehicle itself. And again, all of these things can be disabled based on the roles and permissions that are set up in the system. So that's a way to sort of see today's tracks. The next thing is maybe seeing historic tracks from last week, last month, last year, maybe a specific time period. And the way to do that is via the Tracks tab down here. So first thing you do is you pick the vehicle or vehicles that you're interested in. So you check next to the vehicles that you're interested in, and you don't have to narrow it. You don't have to do just one vehicle at a time. You can do multiple vehicles. So maybe if you have a winter storm, you have the 3 vehicles that you have in place right now. You could check all of those, and then you could draw the tracks for all 3 vehicles and see where they are. So you're not limited to one, but this is how basically you do that. And then you pick the days of interest here. So you check next to the day, and if you notice down here, it gives you each day gives you the start time and the stop, and then a quick how long the distance they drove. And then you just draw the track, and then it draws that track or tracks for, again, a day or multiple days, depending on what you want to see there. And you can also, the key thing is narrowing it down to your time frame. So if you're interested, maybe you want to know they're doing snowplow activities from, say, midnight to 6 a.m. Well, you could pick, December 6th, midnight, and then you pick, December 6th at 6 a.m. And then what you do is, one of the key things is you just hit this little hourglass, and then it only shows basically that time period, and then you draw the track. It's only going to show the tracks for that time period that you're picking there. One other useful function is the replay option. So this is a way for you to see exactly where the vehicle started their driving and then where they're ending. It's the same steps in that you pick the vehicle or vehicles. So again, you're not limited to just seeing one vehicle to replay. You could actually show multiple vehicles. So that's really helpful, especially maybe in a snow event, to see where all the vehicles are driving around and sort of their paths and so forth. And you go through the same steps. The only difference is you pick the replay button instead of the draw tracks. And it brings up this little dialog box here that allows you to speed up how fast the vehicles are going. So you have this maybe 1 minute, 10-minute interval, and then you hit the play option, and then off the vehicle goes. You start to see where they're driving in the window of time that you set. And you can grab this little box and sort of speed it up or pause it. So just to give you an idea how that works. Then if you're wanting to get down into the real detailed level of data, you can go to the track points tab, and that gives you real granular data. And as you select records in your list here, it'll go to the map and show you where that is. And just like I was talking about up above where you can add additional columns, you can do the same thing down here where you add columns, like maybe you're interested in speed, or maybe you want to know when the broom is down or when the plow is down. You can add those variables here, and when you add those variables or those columns, then what it does is it shows the value over here in your little pop-up window as well. So, and you can go bi-directional. In other words, if you know the location, you can click on the map and it'll highlight the record over here, or you can click on the record over here and it'll go to where it is on the map. And you can see it can get down into, one of the things with this solution is the smart tracking. So the more the vehicle is doing things, the more information we're sending up down to the second level. So if the broom is down, they're doing more turns, it's sending more data up to get more accurate data than say just driving a straight line and they're not actually plowing. It's sending data up, but not as granular as say, when you really need to know certain things, like when the plow is down and they're, turning. You want to make sure that gives you really accurate tracks, one for reporting, but also shows you on the map exactly where, where they're plowing, on which side of the street, and all of that as well. You can export this data out in a variety of formats. So if you want to do more analysis of the data, you have an export option here. You can also show the data in a graph format. So that's really helpful to sort of see the high and low points. And again, I'm going to demonstrate some of that here, but instead of seeing it just in a tabular form here, you can actually see a graph, and then you can interact with the graph, and it'll go to the map. So if T1 is speeding, you want to know, for the day, maybe where the high points of the speeding is. You click on the high, speeding location on the graph, and it'll then show you on the map exactly where that location is. All right, so let me pop off here and get to actually showing you the demo here. Minimize that, and so can you see LiGO now with the map? And
yeah,
okay.
Yeah,
perfect.
we got it.
All right, so this is generally what you would see when you log in. We have 3 vehicles here. If you notice, there's different colored icons. So we have a library of icons that are available for your vehicles, different colors, as well as the actual track colors can be different as well. So you can also, if you have specific icons that you want for your vehicles, we can also import, or you can actually add those yourself into the system. So we have sort of a library of icons that are available, but you can use, we have some customers that have, specific icons for what a snowplow looks like versus a sweeper. But also just on this, you notice there's a name column, there's last seen. What last seen means is when the vehicle was last on. So if you notice, these 2 above here are actually seen yesterday. So they haven't been turned on today, whereas this one has a time. So that means it's been on today and it's actually on, 1:19 or so. There's also a connection, so that tells you if the vehicle is currently online and the engine is on, versus these other 2 are red, so they're turned offline at the moment. So if I just right-click on this guy, notice when I clicked on it, it's sort of centered on that vehicle. I can then draw today's tracks. So it'll draw the tracks for the day, and you notice down below here, it gives me when they started, 7:25 a.m., gives me the stop, gives me the distance, 46.3 miles there, and just gives me, that's a quick way to sort of see the today's tracks. If I wanted to go back and look a little bit further maybe for this vehicle, I can maybe go back to the beginning of this month, and then I just hit this little hourglass here, and then what it does is it gives me all of the days for this month that they've driven. So I can see the first, second, third, fourth, etc. When they started their day, when they ended, you know, approximate miles driven. And you notice down here, the vehicle, there's a little tail behind there, and you can also see, I'm going to cover this in a little bit more detail when we cover events, but that's a real-time event here happening. It's just an idling event. The idling is set to basically not trigger until it's been idle for 2 minutes. That is configurable. So you could set it for not triggering until it idles for 5 minutes, or whatever your sort of preference is for idling can be configured there. And also notice down below here, again, I'm going to cover events in a little bit more detail later, but just because we're having an event right now, I just wanted to sort of point that out. And then you have, you can come down here and see, you know, the live events that are occurring. And again, we're going to cover that in a little bit more detail in a minute. So if I wanted to, say, add and remove columns, I can say remove this driver name and change that. And if I wanted to put, say, idle on there, I can add the idle option. So you can change what's viewed there in the view based on just changing the column there. The other thing, as I mentioned, is you can narrow down your search. So maybe, again, if you had a longer list of vehicles, I could go 3427, and then what it does is it just shows me that vehicle and at this time, and doesn't show me any others, and I can focus in on that one. And then any of the, you know, the sort of searches, or as well as events that are occurring, just focus in on that vehicle that you just sort of set your query to. So it narrows everything down to that vehicle if you do that. And you notice now it shows 1 of 3. And then if I wanted to clear that, I just hit the X, and then it goes back to my list of vehicles again there. The other thing is I mentioned is you can put vehicles in these buckets for temporary. So I can put it in a blue bucket. It puts this little halo blue around there, and then I can come up and then just filter based on that. It's the same concept, but just a different way of doing that, especially if you have a huge list of vehicles. It's a way to sort of filter down. And again, you can clear that, and that's sort of a temporary view of those. So let me just go back. Let me go to say yesterday and draw this track. So this is yesterday's track for 3427. This is sort of where they went for that day. I can also do a replay. So this allows me to sort of see where the vehicle has driven. I can speed that up or slow that down. So down to 1 minute, 2 minutes, and just to get an idea where the vehicle is going here. And I can grab this little box too and sort of move it to a certain time period. So if you notice here up above, it's 9:52 a.m. and I can, you know, if I was interested right at 10 to see where it was, I can do that. Just like all the other frames, you can also add values here. Again, we're capturing a ton of information. So based on what's important to you, you can add, you know, again, I sort of always use speed as an option, but you could add the speed column or other values, and you can see those values as they're going there. I can pause it. So that's just a way to sort of replay the tracks of where they're going. Okay, so let's see. And then if we go to the track points here, this is where we can get down into a little bit more finer detail. So you notice here, this is 55 seconds. This next one's 56 seconds, 58 seconds. So we're getting down into the second level of data there, and as you click, it shows you the location on the map of where that is. And just like all the other locations, you can add additional values here based on what's important to you. So if we add, say, the speed, or we add, any other values you can add in here, or let's say got broom down. I think this broom down. So that tells us, where broom is down, for example, as well. And you can export this data out into a variety of formats here if you'd like. You can show it in a graph format. So based on, again, the values that you're interested in, you can pick the graph, and then you can pick the specific location. So whether it be speeding or other values, you can click on the graph and it'll go to the map as well. So that's the difference between the tracks and the track points. Clear that. Okay, so let me go back to our PowerPoint here. All right, and I'm going to share that screen. Okay. So working with the map, you have a toolbar across the top which allows you to zoom in, zoom out. You can zoom to the extent of the vehicles. You can clear the map. So if you've drawn a bunch of tracks on the map, you can clear those tracks. You can also get the address as well. So you can get an address or latitude and longitude for a location. So that might be helpful. If vehicles stopped at a location for a while, you can click and see the address or intersection. You can go to the last extent of where the map was previously. So if you zoom in, you can then go back to where you were before. And then I'm going to cover this in a little bit more detail, but this is a really helpful tool. It's an area search. So if you get a call, say, from a customer saying, I either didn't get service, or maybe they didn't plow my street, or they didn't sweep my street, or they, drove by with the plow up, you can use that and then actually identify in that area if there was a vehicle there and whether they actually did maybe sweep or based on that tool. And again, I'm going to cover that in a little bit more detail here in a minute. In the upper right-hand corner of the map, you can hit the drop-down menu and go from a street view to a satellite view. So this allows you to see an aerial view, and this helps to be able to see, parking lots or the actual building footprints to see, especially if you're looking at maybe plowing or sweeping, to see if they're in a parking lot or, the cul-de-sac or those sort of things. Across the top, there's a number of little check boxes based on some different things that you might want to do, such as a trace. So you can turn that off or leave it on, but that gives you just a little tail behind the vehicle if the vehicle is actually moving. It just gives you a visual of the sort of the direction the vehicle is going. There's also a follow selected checkbox. So if you have that checked, based on the vehicle you have selected in your list over here, it's going to continue to follow that vehicle on the map. So it'll always recenter the map based on that vehicle that you have selected in your list. So if you don't want to do that, you just want to uncheck that option over here across the top. Okay, so this is the area search tool. So this is what I was talking about, where you can identify if maybe there was service or proof of presence in an area. You can draw the box over an area and then pick your time frame. So you pick your start, date, and time. So it can be on the same day between a certain time period to where you're going. And then you can either choose an event rule. So event rule means maybe a specific thing that happened in that area, whether it be maybe the plow down or the sweeper down or speeding or idling. So you can narrow it down even further. But typically what you might do is just not choose an event rule. You just use the default, which is none, and then just do a search, and it'll find all the vehicles that were in that area within the time period. And it'll list those down here. And then what you can do is you can click on and right-click on the specific one that you're interested in and draw the tracks. And it'll then show, exactly where the vehicle came through the area. Of course, if they stopped at a location or anything along those lines, you see exactly where the vehicle went through the box that you drew there. This is the Windows drop-down menu, and one of the tools that's useful here is a streets view. So this gives you a bird's eye view of the vehicle. And this is for vehicles that are in, especially helpful if they're in motion, driving down a street. You can get an aerial view of the vehicle, but you can also get a windshield view of the vehicle. So what just helps maybe to see their perspective of what they're looking at on the street as well. There's also the option. Yes.
Brett, just to be clear, those the street level view, that's not anything that's live because we
Correct.
don't have any. Okay.
Correct. It's basically I don't know if you've ever seen like Google, they drive down the streets and they take a video of everything, and it's captured the streets, and you can sort of pan around and look at the house, look down the street. So it is not real time, but it's just a historic visual view of what you would see on that street.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. There is also traffic, real-time traffic, so it gives you a traffic option, and based on the color, it tells you, congestion and so forth based on red, and green is clear. Okay, so I'm going to again pop back off here and show you sort of the live demo here. All right, so I was talking a little bit about the toolbar, and there is these options to zoom to an area. A lot of times what I use is, especially if you have a mouse, is you just use the roller. It's really handy. You roll up to zoom in, or you roll it down to zoom out. That's really straightforward. Or you can just double click on the map, and that's another way to get into the map as well. So I tend to use those more than, this is handy if you want to get right in and draw a box that goes to that area. Or this allows you to go to the extent of your vehicles. And there's also the plus and minuses, so you can zoom out and zoom out those. So there's a variety of ways, that, depending on what you feel is more comfortable for you to sort of interact with the map itself. Let's go over to click on this guy. If I wanted to, for example, get the address or location, it can, based on where I put it, it gives me sort of the latitude and longitude of that that location of where I dropped that. Also, as I mentioned, so if I draw the tracks, one of the things is you may want to you just clear the map. It just basically removes, especially if you have a lot of tracks drawn, it just clears those off for you. You can also hit this back, so it essentially goes back to where you were last time. And then the area search. So the area search, again, is that really helpful tool to be able to show, when vehicles were in a location, and it brings up a box here, and you can choose your time period, either days or specific times, and then you can choose options here depending on, again, whether it's a speeding issue or maybe plow down or sweeper down. You can choose those, but generally you just pick this default and you hit search, and then it gives you wherever the vehicle or vehicles have gone through here. So you can see this one, 3102 from yesterday. I can then draw the tracks and see where that vehicle went through yesterday, for example, that area. So again, that's just helpful to maybe customer service of dealing with maybe a customer that calls in and either has a complaint about not getting service or ran over my mailbox or something. You can get proof there. There's also, so the other thing is just I can turn on the satellite view and get perspective there with a satellite view. So if I go, let's go back to my full extent here, and it looks like these guys up here are maybe parked in the parking lot. So I can see, the building and where exactly they're located. That's sort of helpful to see where they're parked at, for example. I can also use a measurement if there's a measurement tool. So if you wanted to get an idea of distance, feet, yards, miles, that sort of thing. And the other thing is you can do a search. So if you, rather than clicking on a location and getting the address or latitude and longitude or XY, you can also, if you know an address or if you know a position, you can also enter that in and it'll zoom to the map as well. So you can enter those in and we'll go to the location based on what information you have. The other thing you can do is you can also put that down here as well. So if you know of a specific address, you can enter that in and it'll go to the location as well. But it can be either an exact address or an intersection. The way you do an intersection is you just put the street name. So the street name like Memorial and you put the and or an ampersand and then the other street that it's intersecting with, and it'll zoom to the intersection down here. Okay, let's see, so that's satellite. Let me change back to our sort of street view there. Let's see. So that's interacting with the map. Now let's move on to the alarms, events, and notifications. So basically alarms are visual cues on the map for an event that's occurring. So you can decide whether you want alarms to be displayed for the event or not. So in other words, probably a lot of cases speeding or maybe idling, those sort of things you want to have an alarm so it displays it. But other things may not be important for you to show visually on the map. Like let's just say leaving the yard and they're gone all day. You might not care about an alarm showing up for when they leave the yard, but you want reports on that. You maybe want to know how much time they're spending outside of the yard and driving around, and then when they get back to the yard. But you don't necessarily need it to be displayed visually, an icon for when that occurs. So that's something that in the events that I'll go through in a little bit more detail, you can decide for each event whether you want an alarm to show or not. There's a lot of these that already have those set up as by default, but that's all configurable based on your preference whether you want those. And there's also a variety of events or icons that you can use for those based on your preference as well. Color, a specific icon for speeding or just a color code sort of thing as well. And to get to those events, there's an events tab in the lower left-hand corner. And you can either see live events that we were seeing either earlier, or you could go back in time and look at events that happened, yesterday, last week, and you can color code those events. So across this is sort of a time window, and you can see, back here when events occurred, and you can drag this box over the color, and then what it does is it then brings all of your events down in your list here, down below, based on this window of time. And you can set that window to, down to the hour or minutes or a full day, and then it displays those events down here. And then when you click on the event, it'll actually zoom to it on the map. So it goes to the map and shows you the location. And vice versa, again, you can click on the map and it'll highlight the event down below here as well. So there's a lot of out-of-the-box events that we provide with the system that are configurable. So things such as idling, and idle, we can capture two types of idle. We can capture idling being the vehicle is stopped and the engine is running. That's idling. Or idle time could be any time the vehicle is not moving. So it could be the vehicle's off, and you just want to know, maybe for the fleet department, they want to know utilization and how much the vehicle is being utilized, and that's idle. So you can get different types of reports based on what's important to you for that. Speeding and harsh driving. So we have speeding is the same thing where we have event rules that are set up for specific road types. So there's highway is a different speed than, say, residential versus arterials, collectors. So there's different speeds that are set to those, and those are predefined in the system. So if they're driving a certain speed on a highway, it's going to be a higher speed limit or posted speed limit than, say, a residential. And then by default in the system, it's set up to not trigger until it goes 7 miles over the speed limit. But that's configurable, again, based on your preference to when you want to be notified that a vehicle is speeding. So you could have it 5 miles over the posted speed limit, or it could be 10 miles over the speed limit. So again, depending on what your parameters or requirements there, that's configurable in the event. The other thing is harsh driving. So harsh driving is taking into a number of things into account with regards to G-force. So this could be acceleration, braking, cornering. Those all get triggered based on a G-force, and same thing, that's configurable as well. But there's some sort of best practices on how that's set up, and we have that already pre-configured for when those events occur, and that's really to help on your assets, your vehicle maintenance, and to reduce maintenance, or obviously safety of the driver and the public, et cetera. The other types of events, geofence events, so you can, based on your boundaries that we import into the system, these can be, maybe routes, they can be district boundaries, they can be the city limits, they can be maybe the yard boundaries, and then from there you can decide whether it's inside or outside the geofence that you want to capture. Trip events are based on the driving, and so that's a key one with regards to the snowplow and the sweeping and the time and the miles that they're driving is based on the trips. And then stops, we can capture known stops or unknown stops. What that means is you can import in locations that are known stops. Say if you already have all the city facilities, you can import those in, or all the fuel stations, and then your report can actually show the specific name of those, maybe City Hall versus the Fleet Department versus solid waste building, et cetera, where they're stopping, versus unknown stops are where you haven't imported anything in, but it's still capturing the address at that location. So your reports are going to be able to show, where it's a known stop or unknown stop and that sort of thing. So, and then you can create your own events as well. And so we can do additional training where we can go through and create specific event rules or events that are important for you. And we have already created some events in the system that are specific for you, that are not, out of the box. So some of the things that we've added in here are, for example, plowed street sweeping, when the broom is down, event, the leaf removal event. So when the the leaf removal vehicle is in action, and then the snowplow. So we've added some events, and we can fine tune those as well, and we can add additional events based on what you want to do. And the key thing with this is that it's notification, but it also relates to your reports. So all of these things are important because it's essentially identifying certain things and then putting those into either a report or on a map for you. So the geofence, I have added a geofence boundary into as an example, and I'll show you in a minute. I think I put the fleet services area in there, and but you can decide whether or not you want to know time inside. So, for example, we have customers that have dump zones or wash zones where their street sweepers are going in, and they want, the supervisor wants to make sure that they're not spending too much time in the dump zone, for example. So you can capture time for those, or it's maybe outside of the boundary. So they leave the city limits or they leave the county, and you want to be notified of those, or a supervisor wants to be notified, or you actually want to capture the time that they're outside of those or inside those areas as well. Okay, so I'm just going to cover the events and reports in one because they're sort of related. The events roll into your report. So just like the events, we have a lot of out-of-the-box reports that are available in the drop-down menu. And all of those can be configured. So there's sort of some templates that are there that can be set for daily, weekly, monthly, your own custom time frame that's specific to your time frame of interest, and which vehicles sort of fall into the reporting for those. So trip and idle, time on site, vehicle utilization. So depending on, again, who needs to see what reports, you can set the permissions for different groups to see certain reports based on their roles in the system. And again, as you get down the road, you may narrow it down to just street sweeping versus snowplow, and then they may just want to see those specific reports, and all that is set up based on the permissions in the system. So here's an example of the trip and idle. So it gives you trips, when they start and stop, the total distance, gives you the idle time versus driving. So for sweeping or snowplow, you probably want to have little idle time. It's more driving or trip. So as a manager, you're wanting to know they're spending most of their time driving. But you may have others where they're idle is important. They're going out and maybe doing meter changes or meter checks, and they're actually stopping a lot and visiting, or maybe doing inspections. Their idle time would most likely be higher than driving. So there's just a type of report that you can utilize for that. Time on site is you want to know maybe certain locations, the time that the vehicles are, when they arrive, when they depart, the total time on site. So that it automatically captures that information based on when they're driving. And again, that's the known location. So point of interest, it can either be a point or it can be that area or a geofence that are these site locations. Vehicle utilization really gives you a complete list of your vehicles, and a lot of times that's a monthly report to give you an idea, how much the vehicle is being utilized, how many miles, average miles per day, trips, days in use, etc. Speeding reports, so this is showing an example, but it doesn't have, for example, our speeding report actually shows the posted speed limit and the actual speed limit, and which road type it is in the report. But if you notice on our reports, you have links. So you run the report, and then you can actually go to the map from the report. So that's helpful to, you see an event, but you actually want to see, well, where specifically is it? Well, you can click on this, and then it'll go right to the map for where that event occurred. And there's another report, it's called an events report. This is nice because it's an ad hoc type of a report that you can create. And you can combine event rules, and you can tailor it to specific vehicles, and you can tailor it to specific time frames that are important to you. So just as an example, you might say, I want to know, within a district boundary, this vehicle, this time frame, how much trips or how many miles they're doing within that, or how much idle time is spent in that, for example. And then you run that report, and it gives you sort of an ad hoc report for that specific, the parameters that you're interested in. It just lets you do ad hoc reports for that. And then if you decide down the road that this report, you really want to use that as a permanent report, you can then name that report. And I'll cover this a little bit here in a minute, but you can name it, and then it can be a permanent report in your drop-down menu. So the ad hoc report can really become, as you see it as something that you permanently want. You can save it and have it there that you just run all the time. The other thing with the reports as well is all of the reports can be set up on a schedule to be emailed to you. So you don't have to necessarily run the report manually. You can just have it set up to be sent to you. Let me share my screen again here. You can once you know that you want these reports on a regular basis, say once a week in the morning, I want a sweeping report, I want a plowing report, you can just basically get those emailed, and I'll show that in a minute here under the reports drop-down menu. So let me cover the events and the alerts first. So under the events tab, we have this when you click on the specific event rule, and some of these I actually turned this one off earlier. This was one that I created. It says left fleet services area. So I have a geofence boundary for the service area, and I've turned that off for now, but I just wanted to show you as an example of how you can see these events, and then and zooms to the map. And if you notice, you probably can't see it, but I have up here color codes, and there's an actual speed limit one that's yellow. And if I grab my window and go over the yellow section, then it brings that the list of events for that time, my window here, and again, they're yellow. So, and you can change the colors. I'll show you how to do that here in a second. But this gives me, those specific locations. And one of the things is I turned off I set it to 0 as instead of 7 miles over the posted speed limit, just so I could get some speed limit events here. That's why you see so many, is because I just set it to 0. So anytime it goes over the posted speed limit by like 1 mile, it would show an event here. But I did scale that back to 7 minutes. But this is really just to show you the idea of the event rule. And notice again, it's history here. I can narrow this down to just the ones that I want to look at just by unchecking. So I can uncheck this, and I just want to look at maybe speeding, for example, and idling. Then it's only dealing with those two events here, for example, or I can come back in and check them all just like that. I can also narrow my window down to to a specific hour, well, it's to an hour rather than 3 hours. I can narrow that window down. And that's just really showing, you know, that window just shows the number of events as you sort of scroll over there, that area. So that's events, and these events are defined in the events rule. So if I come up here under admin, there's what is called events rule. And if we look at the sort of default event rules here, we've got a lot of different options for actual speed limit. You may want to set a notification option, so you could set up one event rule for anytime a vehicle goes over 75 miles an hour, I want an email notification, versus this is actual speed limit. So this is more down to the individual road type and the specific speed. So that's just an example of two different event rules. The one that I set up here just recently is this is the left fleet services area, and that was an event rule that we saw earlier. So if I bring this up, the nice thing about this is it's really straightforward to create these event rules. But I named this left street event or left fleet services area, and I've got it enabled. I choose. We're going to get into this in a little bit more detail when we maybe do some admin training, but you can set up tags for your vehicle. So you can tag, say, the plow vehicles versus leaf removal, and you can then set the event rule for the specific vehicle types. So in this case, I just did it for all vehicles. You could set this on a schedule or always active. So in other words, if you wanted it only to show information during work hours, you could set it up on a schedule, or you could do the reverse of that. I just want to know when vehicles are used off work hours. So you could set it up sort of the reverse of that by setting it up on a schedule when this event occurs. And then you have expressions, basically, and the expression that I have here is a geofence expression, and I wanted to know when the vehicle leaves, basically, the fleet services area, and then it closes that event when they come back into the area. So once the vehicle goes back in, it closes that event. And really, this specific one is for maybe a report where you want to know how much time they're actually out, you know, working outside of the area, as one example. In this case, I don't have, you could set it up to be a delayed event or immediate event. You can set up a notification. So I don't have one set up here, but, you know, email, or it can be an SMS. It can email self, so it could send a message to the driver. So there's a variety of options of notifications here. And I also, I turned this off, but you can set it, this is how you set it up to, this is basically the presentation is the alert that shows on the map. So you can decide whether you want it to show on the map or not. You can decide what color you want that to be, and that's the window color down here. So down in here, what color, you choose that, and that's the color that displays in your Events tab. And then you can label it. So in other words, if you wanted to show the actual speed, for example, you can label the speed actually, or that sort of thing. Or you can change the icon that's displayed for the actual event. So again, it could be a variety of options here, and you can add additional icons in here based on, you know, you might have something different that you want to show for that. So this is the event role, and this is related. This specific one is fleet services area here, and so the first step that I really took is I created a geofence for the fleet area. So under the geofence tab, there's a variety of ways to create geofences. You can create, and what I did is I used the polygon. That just allows you to click and create the boundary. But you can create a route. You can import existing geofences into the system. So if you have pre-existing boundaries, like city limits or your routes, we can import those in. But I just went ahead and created a fleet services geofence here earlier, and I don't know if this is really the fleet services, but it's just to give you an example here. And the nice thing is you can create one fairly quickly, and then you can always adjust. You can always adjust the boundary as you wish. So you can grab these little black things and move it to exactly how you want it, the boundary to look. So I can shift things, and then all I have to do is then save that. And so that was the first step, is really creating the geofence boundary. And then the next step was the creating of that. I basically created this this event rule specifically for when the vehicles leave that boundary. And then from there, I created a report. So the report is left fleet services report. And if I was to run this, so I'll go ahead and run it, and I'll just run the default here. And so this gives me anytime the vehicle left the area and came back in, it sort of closes it. And so if I pick a specific link over here, then what it's going to do is it's going to show me exactly where they left the boundary and where they went. So this may be useful if leaving the city limits or something. You could see where excuse me, where they left the boundary there. But that's the sort of workflow there. Is I created a geofence, created an event rule, and then I created a report. And the report is all done under this manage reports. So I can edit existing reports. Again, this is based on permissions. So the permissions that you have, you can set it up so certain users can't edit or remove reports. You can set it up so that they can't create reports. You can set it up so they can only view certain reports. And then these are a bunch of templates that you can use. And what I did is I essentially used the event rule template, and I opened that event rule template and then just defined my report here. So it's sort of a blank slate for me, where I want to say, I went through and I said, okay, and I'll just create a different one as an example. Maybe left city limits. And then, so this is the main title of the report, and then I can create a subtitle based on, city limit geofence, for example. You can then choose the format that you want for the report to be in. It could be HTML, CSV, PDF, a zip file. You can then choose the parameters, the time parameters. So if you want it weekly, monthly, custom, I'll just use daily here. And then you define, again, the event rule that you're interested in. So I don't have a city limits one, but I'll just choose, left the service area as an example here. And then you can choose, again, related back to the tags, if you just wanted your street sweeping vehicles, or if you wanted all vehicles, you choose which group of vehicles you want that report to be run on. And then lastly, you can set that up on a schedule. So I can set that up to be emailed either daily or weekly or once a month. I can choose which day of the week I want it to be emailed. I can say every Friday I want that to be emailed to me at say 5:30 in the morning. 30, and then I can choose my recipient. So one of the things we'll want to do down the road here, right now everybody's grouped into a users group, but if you want to sort of say the street sweeping supervisor is one or versus a snowplow, we can create different groups of users, and then they can get these notifications or reports sent to them based on the user group that they have defined. So if I was to pick this one, basically everybody, all 20 users that we set up in the system would all get this report sent to them. But, what we want to do, maybe if we have the admin training, we can go through and define the groups, who's supervisors of which groups and who gets the notifications and so forth. And then all I do is I would just save this, and now in my drop-down menu, I just have a new report. It should be called Left City Limits there, and that would basically you could run that report, or you could, right now it's set up to send email notifications on Friday. But I'm going to go ahead and delete that one, and because that was just to show you an example of how to sort of create a report there. So I have been talking a lot, so I want to make sure I have time for questions, give you time for questions here and answers. So I've sort of thrown a lot of information at you. So do you have questions so far?
I will open it up to anybody. You're right, it's a lot. And what we're probably going to need to do is sit down and play with the system, and I imagine that's going to generate some of the questions.
Exactly, yeah.
One of the things we are, and you did touch on it, one of the things we're going to be most interested in is importing the routes from GIS into the system so that we can then, again, see what progresses are and those kind of things.
Okay.
I'm assuming that as far as being able to see the progress on a route, that's something that's not going to be a standard kind of deal that we would need to, that's something you guys will need to work up with us when we get there?
Yeah, so we'll help you, we'll basically help you set that up. So the first thing would be to send us the route, if it's an area or whatever it is, in an ESRI format, or I guess we can work through that, and then we'll help you set that up, and then basically set up the event rules for that. So, time within the route, or stops in there, or, when they complete it, or, all those things can be basically set up and configured based on your preferences there. But yeah, we'll definitely help you work through that. We don't expect you to do that on your own, but we'll help you with that.
Okay. We actually do have Klaus Schreiber. He's our second shift snow supervisor, as well as our urban forester, has a question for you.
Greetings. We're running 2 12-hour shifts. So how would you use this to track where the first 12-hour shift went through on streets versus the second shift? So trying to keep from duplicating going back on the same streets that have been done for snow removal specifically.
Okay. So I guess what I would do, let me just bring something up here as an example. I'm just bringing up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up another customer's that had basically a snow event, so I can, because right now you obviously don't have a snow event, so what I'm going to do is go in and just show you as an example here of how we can look at, I think it's last year in January they had a big snow event, and let's see here. So the first step is to really, obviously pick the vehicles that, are in the group, and then narrow your time frame to show that 12-hour shift, essentially. Let's see, snow and ice. So I'm going to go back in time here.
And while you're doing that, just to add on, so what we're thinking about is it's the same truck running in the same area or the same route, and So first shift goes and completes 70% of it, and second shift comes in and they have to pick up the other 30% of it. And we waste a little bit of time in overlap and trying to make sure which streets were done on one shift versus the other. How would you use this system to maybe address some of those issues?
So, sorry, can you repeat that again?
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at is if we have two 12-hour shifts and one first shift is working in an area and they only complete 70% of their area. When second shift comes in, they need to do the other 30% of the area. And right now we do it kind of by word of mouth or, you know, just general discussion between drivers at best. And that's not always 100%. We don't catch stuff. You don't remember every street you were on, whatever. So how could you use this system to try to minimize the amount of time that the second shift goes back and they're on the exact same road that the first shift just pulled off of?
Okay, so one thing is if you at least have the area where whether it be an area boundary or the actual route boundary, you could have that. You can display that so you can see this and you can label that, and then you could draw the tracks for that specific window. So where I showed where, you know, from a shift, it's basically from say 12 midnight to 6 a.m. let's say, or whatever the shift is. You then draw the tracks and it'll just show the tracks of where those specific vehicles that work in that route actually drew in the area, and then you would see visually where, you know, what was left. That's one way to do that.
Are the maps printable?
So yeah, you can print the map by either right-clicking. That's probably a way, or typically what I do for reporting is I just go in and I just use the snip and then I put it into like a document, because you may want maybe the report information. So like you grab that and then you may want the report also, or additional, you know, typing information, and I just copy and paste it into a Word document or print it that way. But you can also right-click on the frame and print it as well. You can print or save as, you know, save as a PDF option based on, you know, the specific location that you're interested in sort of showing visually.
Gotcha. And this tracks plowing but doesn't track spreading, right?
It can do both.
Oh, it can?
Yeah, it can do spreading, it can do the street sweeping, the plowing, it could do the leaf removal. So yeah.
So if we wanted to click on a bridge, we could say, when was the last time this bridge was spread with salt?
So that's yeah, that's that area search tool that I mentioned. So
okay.
I would, you know, if there's a bridge in the area, I don't know, say this is a bridge here or whatever, I just go here, do a box over that, and then you could pick your specific event rule. And I don't know, some of these we still, I think, need to get defined in here, but like leaf removal, if you wanted to know that they did leaf removal on that area between a time frame, that's how it would tell you if they did that. But I think, yeah, that's one way to do that, is that way. The other way is to actually run the report, and you have a link on the report as well, so to the map. So you can run a report if it's, say, a leaf or it's a spreader report. You can then, you know, it'll show you the actual streets on the report. Then you could click the link, and then it'll go to the map of where they actually did the, you know, the spreading or the plowing, etc., from the report.
One other thing that we had talked about, if I recall correctly too, Rat, was the idea that if we get advanced enough with this, we could dump the data to GIS real quick and actually use the color symbology to show you how long it had been since a road had been visited. So we could set that up in a flooded color sort of thing where you'd be able to see, hey, we were here within the last 12 hours or we weren't as well.
Yeah, so exactly. So with our LiGO access, we have basically an ESRI data model that's an AVL. It's a LiGO data model that has for live vehicles as well as your historic tracks. So that data can then be sent over, and then you can do whatever you want on the ESRI side. So we have customers that have public-facing, and they use it both internally and in some cases public-facing, and it's usually, you know, it's sort of delayed, but it gives then what you can do is you can use gradient colors. So maybe over time, it starts as had happened just in the last 2 hours as a dark red. 4 hours is a little bit lighter red, you know, 6 hours is a little lighter, and then it gets down to pink, and then, so that way you can sort of see over time, you know, where they just got done, or other things that you want to do with there's just a lot more flexibility once we pass the data over to your ESRI that you can do, you know, over a whole month, or, you know, you want to see it more, you can sort of scale that depending on how you want to visualize it on your side. So yes.
Okay. Thanks. Anybody else? Any other brave souls? No? Okay, Rhett. It's I'm getting blank stares, so I think we got them.
Okay, so everybody, if for some reason you cannot log in, all 20 people that you gave me names, I'll just show you here. I've got a view where I can see all the users here. But here's a list of the users that are in the system, and as I mentioned, if I just I'll pick on you, Clay. I'll right-click, go Edit User here, and this is again, it's the first initial of the first name and then last name, and then again you'll want to go in and change your password up here once you log in, just so, because right now everybody has the same password. And then right now there's only one role, so we do want to probably down the road have an administrative training and sort of set up who has what permissions based on roles, who can see what and who can edit what and so forth. But right now everybody sort of falls in this operator, which is you can do certain things. You can't delete stuff or do anything that's going to destroy anything, but we can have an admin role versus a street sweeping role versus, you know, and so forth. And I can set that administrative training up with you or whoever is going to be in that, and we can sort of define that and so forth. So I do want to make, let's see, I think there was one person that had a hyphenated name. I don't want to pick on them, but I think I just used, if I need to change that, just let me know, because I think it was just the first, it was initial and then the first last name, but if we need to change, there may be one, I don't have the name off the top of my head. Oh, here it is, right here, sorry.
Stacy Hopkins Reynolds.
So,
and Stacy Hopkins is fine.
Okay, I just have S. Hopkins, so I just want to make sure they tried to log in and they couldn't get in. That's the username for that specific one. So sorry to pick on that person, but I just wanted to make sure.
She needs it.
Okay. All right.